Well, good evening. Tonight is our first show of the Conservative View after the election. So I assume there'll be some high spirits and some spirited discussion. Why don't we start with introductions?
Thank you, Al. My name is Chris Wilson, current school committee member and planning board member, and also a school building member.
Ed Bertarelli, a couple of town boards, library board, geriatric authority and housing authority, and also a longtime member of the Republican Party and Republican Town Committee.
Well, Ed, this is your first show after the election. We'll let you start.
Oh, boy, thank you. Well, a lot to take in. I think we think our last show was probably a month before the election or whatever, and we expressed a lot of concerns. We talked at the time about the media and the whole narrative of the Trump's attempt on Trump's life, the assassination attempt, Biden's withdrawing under pressure, and then Kamala being appointed or not nominated or whatever you want to call it in a very speedy fashion by the Democrats, and then basically the race went from Trump being far ahead because of Biden's debate performance to, in the minds of the media, a horse race and dead even. And then we went through the permutations from all the state polls and whatever, and we were very, very much victims of polling. It seemed that from the beginning, the media, mainstream media anyway, wanted to make it a horse race of sorts. And the narrative was basically that Kamala was on the upswing, Trump was on the downturn, and as the election neared, we had all sorts of things about Trump having a comedian who made jokes about Puerto Rico at a rally, that he said this, that he said that, all sorts of negative things about Trump. But I think the irony for Kamala Harris was that she was undone by The View, the show which no one would claim The View is anywhere pro-Republican show. In fact, the ladies and women on that show are as anti-Republican and as anti-conservative as you can imagine. But the deadly question for Kamala was, would you do anything differently than Joe Biden? And she said, I can't think of anything. And that obviously didn't get a lot of play in the mainstream media, but it got a lot of play among people like Joe Rogan and bloggers and people who were just looking for
she came out and said, I am not Joe Biden.
Yep, and then
I'm going to be my own person.
Yep. And then
the question was, the real question was, what's the difference?
Yes.
Right. What would you do different?
Yep.
And she said,
Yep.
I wouldn't do anything
I
different.
can't think of anything. Nothing comes to mind.
So nothing comes to mind, which is very interesting. So now you're looking at, well, my grocery prices have roughly doubled. Gas prices have gone whatever they're going to go to. Prices of everything else, interest rates were at a record high. So everyone's getting it on the back of the neck. And they're concerned that, or they're convinced that their main issue will be reproductive freedoms and the state of democracy. They talk themselves into that and then label Trump a fascist, which is an insult to anybody who ever lived under the Nazi regime or even Stalinism. It's a gross insult that an American could call anyone that because they never experienced anything like a life and death situation. So they hung their hat on that in a campaign of smearing Trump every way they could. And apparently, for a lot of people, they'd heard everything possible they'd heard about Trump, and they didn't care. They weren't interested. I think their belief factor in the media had crashed and burned when they had basically pretended that there was nothing wrong with Joe Biden. For roughly a year and a half, there was absolutely anyone who said there was something wrong with Joe Biden had a problem themselves. And when they saw themselves what was going on,
that first debate.
Yes. What was the media telling us? That there was no problem. And okay, so.
Oh yeah, his first debate performance was completely showed the cards that he had, and those cards everybody in America knew he did not have another 4 years left in him.
Well, the last show I mentioned, I said, all the noise aside, in my mind it came down to, if you were happy with the last 4 years vote Biden.
Yep.
If you were happy with the previous 4 years, vote Trump. And I think as we start trying to rationalize it, it all came down to who are you happiest with?
Yep.
Exactly. It was all about the economy. It was all about immigration policy. You know, when you looked at the economy and that true middle class, and as we just said, inflation was up, interest rates were up, people wanted a change. And
mean-
the only way they were going to get a change is through someone that says, I'm going to change things.
Yep.
And when the Democratic candidate says, I wouldn't change anything, it
Yeah.
just spoke
Yeah.
volumes to,
Yep.
okay, I need to put a candidate in office that is going to institute change. And Trump
Yeah.
was that person. The people spoke
And then they.
overwhelmingly.
Yeah, and then, of course, the talking heads have to invent reasons because they have to justify their fees. But when you had people defining Hispanics and blacks, and they were neither Hispanic nor black, typecasting people like as a whole group, immigrants, whatever. They threw out every word. Women who were going to go in and secretly vote Democrat because their husbands were going to vote Republican. I mean, they had all of the craziest things. And so a cousin of mine down the Cape said, "Oh, really?" So I go in and my groceries now cost me $400 when they cost me under $300. So I'm supposed to ignore that and go, no, that doesn't mean that Biden was responsible for it, but the inflation was certainly responsible for it, and that was under him. And so, you know, you go and you look and you go. So then we got to, of course, obviously, the election day and election coverage. And if anyone, I said this before the show, if anyone wants to analyze the incredible bias, Democrat bias of the media, forget about Fox News or MSNBC or CNN. Just look at ABC, CBS, and NBC and watch coverage of the nights as the states were called for Trump. And you'll see people, men and women who are wearing outfits and hairdos and whatever, probably cost a month or 2 months' pay for all of us, except Al. And they're lamenting about the state of the world or the state of this and whatever. And you saw the total collapse. But what you saw is that people came out and voted. And Trump had, in the last election, had disparaged early voting, but in a lot of states that had some savvy, they embraced early voting. And a lot of the people who live in rural areas, who work and have jobs that may take them, you know, out of the not on be able to vote on election day, they voted record numbers in early and mail-in voting, which was a key that the Republican vote wasn't going to be suppressed by that. It's actually going to be higher.
Yeah.
Do you think more people voted for Trump in this election or voted against Biden?
Yes.
Kamala, yeah.
Kamala.
Yes,
Kamala Biden,
I think
yes.
both, right? And it
Yeah.
just shows when you look at the breakdown, right? You know, from what Biden got in 2020 to what Kamala got in 2024.
Yeah, she got 6
there was-
million less votes.
Yeah, there was a significant drop in that. So
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
where did those votes go? We saw Trump gain
Some.
millions of votes,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yep.
so yes, it was
Yeah.
a vote
Yeah.
against Kamala and a vote for Trump.
Yeah.
And I think again, it all goes back to what the American people wanted, and
Yeah.
it was, to your point, it was the American voter that decided it. It wasn't the white vote, it wasn't the black vote, it wasn't the Hispanic vote. Like, take all those
those-
categories
yeah, well-
out, like the mainstream media does. It was the American voter, right? Like, we all know America's made up by all those subgroups.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, we're all taxpayers,
We all
and
buy
we all
groceries.
buy groceries, and we all want a good economy
Yeah.
and good policies. So
Yeah.
I'd say more than anything, as I talk through it, it was a vote for Trump.
Yeah.
Right? Because people wanted the change.
Yeah, Al, numbers-wise for people, Biden got 81 million votes last election, which was the highest that anyone ever got. Obviously, COVID and a lot of mail-in voting, they had very extended voting periods, and Trump got 74,500,000, okay? This time, her vote went from 81, Biden's vote was 81 million, she got 75 million. Trump went up 2 million, from 74 million to 76 million. So there's that 4 million.
Did they
votes in
just
it.
stay home?
Well, or else, it also means, though, that there was some people who hadn't voted before, so the fall off in a way was more significant, maybe among some repeat votes. It's hard to guess, but
But I feel like that's like one of those talking points that nobody's really talking about.
No.
Like, where did those 4 million votes
Yeah.
go?
Yeah,
What happened
and
to
then
them?
miraculously,
So-
I mean, it's miraculously, I'm not implying religious thing, but given the history, Trump won the popular vote, which was highly unexpected because George W. Bush was the last one to win the popular vote. And he won it by racking up huge margins in Florida and in Texas. And then what he did was, in like a state like New Jersey or New York, in New York he cut her margin by 1 million votes because she still carried it, but he came further up. Illinois, last time was a romp for Biden. I think she carried it by 4 points. And ironically, Minnesota, her running mate's home state, was very close. Trump came very close, I think within 4 points of carrying the state. So it shows you that his vote came up and hers, what would they call it?
Significantly
They
down.
call it underperform, I guess is the term they use. Yeah.
Well, I
you
mean,
want.
the whole pre-election was about the battleground states.
Yeah, it was, yep.
But it didn't seem like much of a battleground during the election.
Well, it was till election. I don't think anyone knew. And obviously Pennsylvania, where all sorts of shenanigans are possible, Philadelphia and whatever, that his ground game was phenomenal. And in not the rural, but the inner counties outside of Philadelphia and whatever, Trump did well. And as I think we said in the last thing, I was watching Erie County, which is where, oh God, I just forgot what the name of the city is in Erie County, Erie, Pennsylvania, right on the Great Lakes. That's been a predictor for winning the state and the presidency. And it went from Kamala to Trump to Kamala to Trump, and it ended up at Trump. And I said, well, it's going to true to form because it narrowly
That's how it
went
goes.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very strange. Yeah.
Pennsylvania surprised me because you had the person who's leading the election count
Well, one county.
ordered to not count
Yeah.
ballots that didn't meet the state criteria. Now, whether or not you agree with it has to be signed to count.
But that was the law, basically. Yeah.
But it's the law. And stood up and said, I don't care what the law says.
And even
I'm-
the Supreme Court, which was a Democratic Supreme Court, because they're elected by political party, they unanimously said, don't count them.
don't count them.
It just shows sometimes there's bias, right? And unfortunately, when you have systems in place and policies and laws, and a court upholds those laws, and then you have a rogue person that says, well, I'm going to do my own thing, right? Like, where's the integrity of that person?
How do you do that? I'm an
Well, you have
elected
no
official.
integrity.
Very simple.
You
just
have
do
no.
it.
That's simple, right? You know.
I feel, well,
I decide I don't want to pay my taxes.
yeah, but Al, when when a lot of these people are self-justified, so if they regard one side is good and one is evil, I'm doing good. I mean, that's the way a lot of people think today. Whether they're Democrats or Republicans, a lot of people think if you're in the opposing party, there's something wrong with you, something wrong with your thinking, there's something wrong with your morals. And that's, obviously, a lot of it's brought on by the media, but a lot of it's just innate in people. I mean, COVID brought out a very scary part of people where people got, ultra panicked, and I think some people still haven't adjusted to life back in the
Well, I think you
the
saw
world.
it in social media. The social media posts that were so anti-Trump and still are so anti-Trump,
Yep.
and just looking for anything that they can say against him. But the popular vote spoke, and the electoral
Yeah,
vote
well-
spoke, and
well,
he's going to be he's our next president for the
Kamala
next 4
Harris-
years.
Yeah, but when
So-
yeah.
I was not a Biden supporter
Right.
when he ran the first time.
Mm-hmm.
But the minute he got elected, he's my president.
Yeah.
I can't want him to fail.
You want him to fly that plane.
Well, that's
successfully.
it. I mean, you can't want him to fail because then the country fails.
Exactly.
Well, but Al, the fringes and the people who make money in politics today, just like the abortion issue, the race issue, the border issue, whatever you are, they don't want it solved. They make money on stirring up the contest. I mean, the Democrats controlled government for many years while Roe v. Wade was in. They could have enshrined it as law with a Democratic president, a House and Senate, anytime they wanted to. Okay? They could have enshrined in law. They didn't, because that, they find that issue gets them support. That these people, the same way they argue the Republicans are gonna take people's social security away, the same way these bad Republicans are gonna take my right to choose away. Other people are gonna argue different things. I mean, it's like, it's crazy, but to me, a lot of people make a lot of money also on the race issue. There's a lot of people who don't ever want that issue solved because they make a lot of money stirring up racial animosity. It's scary and awful to think about, but that's true.
Right, it's what, in
Yeah.
a sense, what, back in the day, sold the newspapers and what
Yes.
made people tune into
Yeah,
the 6 o'clock
scary.
news.
But the equally important, beside Trump's winning, and he basically carried, when you see he carried Nevada, when he carried it, which he hadn't carried in all of his other times, he carried Arizona. I think, again, we'll make a brief reference to Milford, but a lot of cities and towns in America are experiencing what Milford experiences, and how many 2,000 miles from the border, the effect of uncontrolled immigration. And in every city and town, there are people who have difficult decisions because of this problem. That, Marco Rubio had claimed that under Biden, 15 million people came in. So one of these liberal journals did a study, and they said, Marco Rubio's a liar. Only 10.1 million came in under Trump. And I'm like,
Only?
Only 10.
Oh, and that was the argument. I
One.
said, they admitted to 10.1 instead of 15. And they weren't shocked that they had to admit to the 10.1. Now, that doesn't mean the getaways and whatever else.
Right.
Yeah. But, as you say, we
But
see,
when you talk about Milford being far away from the border,
well, yeah.
you're on the building committee, you're on the school committee.
Yeah.
We're estimating, for the first 40-some years, we had net one child
Yeah.
incremental.
Yep.
In 1974, 220 children graduated Milford High. 40 years later, it's 262.
Right.
Then the immigration started.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, we're adding 200 kids per year.
Yeah.
That's a Memorial Street school.
Exactly. We are seeing the increases in the school. We talk about it all the time, and we know that Supreme Court says, hey, if they come knocking on the door, we let them in and we educate them. We're not arguing that, but it's to control it, right? Because every student that does show up, it does come at a cost to the Milford taxpayers, right?
Yeah.
And we know that when we're seeing our local hotels be spots where they have to house our refugee population. Those refugee populations are coming into the schools with other languages that require more staff to be able to communicate and work with these students. So again, people just need to understand that for every person that comes over the border and there are a family, there is a local cost, and we're seeing it very dramatically.
Now,
And we were
In
saved
Milford,
by the state.
Yeah, but again,
We
that's
not
that's
necessarily.
The
I mean, we can go
last 2
down.
years,
the
we
had
last
7
two, but
Yeah, but that's the.
We saw a
that doesn't-
local-
That's not, yeah, but that's like saying, where did that money come from?
Well, it came from your tax
right,
pocket.
but we
Came from
saw our
us.
local impact in our
Yeah.
Chapter 70
Yeah.
drop
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
significantly,
yeah.
right? So our population need went up, but our Chapter
Yeah,
70,
the
which
first
is
year it
supposed to
went
be a
up
formula,
$7 million. We're
Right.
excited.
Yeah, but again.
Then $7 million
But Al,
again.
the public
Yeah.
doesn't
And
know
then-
this.
yeah,
Public
Boom.
doesn't know this.
yeah,
But they
exactly.
should,
Yeah.
because
Why? Well, then,
You know.
where would they learn this? Go to the town meeting, no one goes.
Right.
Well, but I don't get back to, I'm not taking away from the Milford, but we are that many thousand miles away from the border.
Right.
Just imagine a town in Arizona, Nevada, or even in the Midwest, Nebraska, the meatpacking plants, the farmers with labor. Just think of the impact in even Atlanta, all over, the impact of 10 million people spread out. And I give Governor Abbott and Governor DeSantis credit when they basically showed how hypocritical the New Yorkers were. When they started busing people to Washington and New York City, everyone howled because basically the state of Texas was taking in, that's the major crossing. So Texas probably took in several million people crossing their border and walking through the state or
Well,
going through the
when
state.
when he shipped the immigrants to Nantucket
Yeah,
and the world
the
ended,
hypocrisy was amazing.
you sit there and say, wait a second. We're total not doing what Texas takes in a week.
a minute
Yeah.
probably.
And I think, unfortunately, there was a situation that happened in the last few months where there was a refugee individual that, had a very significant situation that happened and was arrested. So, again, the vetting process that's not happening by allowing them over the border, we're seeing that happen even locally as they're being bussed or flown up this way. So, just control it, right? It can't
can't,
be.
though.
It can't
But
be
it
an
has to
open
stop at the
system.
border.
It has to stop at the border.
You can't let them in
And
the-
there's just the
yeah.
whole other avenue of trafficking that's happening, right? In the drug trade. So if you're having an open border, I heard a great story where, not great, but where underage individuals that are U.S. citizens are given $1,000. They walk over with a backpack, they load them up with drugs, and they bring them back.
Yeah.
And because they can get across the border because they're U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
And why would some 17-year-old not want to take $1,000 to
They
do?
were entrepreneurs,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Exactly. So
Yeah.
you hear these stories, and these aren't made-up stories. These are stories from local sheriffs down
Of course,
there. So
of course.
it's a bigger problem.
Yeah.
There's a local impact in Milford, but there's a massive problem along the border. So let's
Well,
control
imagine what those
that.
school systems experience in Texas.
Yeah.
Compared to, and we're talking here about enormous costs, but in Texas, Texas and Florida they become the second and third largest states in the country. New York is fourth. And we're not our lifetime when New York and California are always there, but it's just amazing to think Florida, and again, you looked at the way they handled the voting, the way they handled everything, but I think another important thing to bring up is the Republicans captured control of the Senate. And that's going to make certainly Trump's cabinet appointees easier to confirm. We could talk about those, but also important, it's going to make appointing judges much easier because with the Republican Senate, he can appoint a lot of judges.
But now you've got 5 weeks left to appoint judges.
Well, yeah, but the Manchin is not, if the Republicans all stick together, Manchin is not voting to it's 50-50. Manchin is not, he's already said he's not voting to confirm any judges. So it'd be 49-50. Her vote wouldn't matter. So it would be sent, they have brought some up.
But the idea was the big push, get liberal judges.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
they can't, because Manchin is not cooperating, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's 50-50. Now it's 49 with him
Well,
not.
the Democrats are in panic mode, right?
Yeah.
They realized how bad
Yeah.
this whole election process is, and now they're in panic mode. But
Yeah.
Well,
again,
one of the issues I saw was you talked about the big things that affected people. Inflation. Now, when Biden first started spending, they said you do these programs, these multi-trillion-dollar programs, it's going to cause inflation. He did, it did, and yet they came back and said the president has nothing to do with inflation.
Would you remember when Obama was in, he had those something to shovels to jobs or something, and we got nothing out of it? Remember that whole thing? He made all these appearances all over the place. And the other thing about it, I think, which I have to mention, the public reacted very badly, including Democrats, to the celebrity parade that she had of all these people endorsing her. But in addition, there was a couple of people on, and they were not black Republicans. They were just city officials in different cities, and they reacted very negatively to Obama's coming into Philly and lecturing black men on you were raised by black women, and if you're going to abandon Kamala Harris, there's basically something wrong with you.
Right.
And the tone of voice was very, very angry and very
Yeah, very
accusatory.
critical. Yeah.
And a
Yeah.
lot of people didn't appreciate it because here's a man who's basically parlayed into a big fortune, very wealthy man.
Well,
Right.
I think
Yeah.
accusing a lot of people of not being ready for a woman president was disingenuous.
yeah.
very.
I think a lot of people, like me, weren't ready for that woman.
Right.
I mean,
It's the same with
I've-
Hillary.
Again,
yeah, but I came out and said I was a Nikki Haley supporter.
Yeah, I voted for Nikki Haley. Yep.
You know, I liked her position, her presentations.
Right.
So I had nothing against a woman president. I just wanted one that would tell me something of value.
Right, and I think it goes to show that some in the mainstream media had used that term, like, it just shows that Americans weren't
Misogyny,
ready
yeah.
for a woman to lead. And I think that is you know, it's such a bad tone to set, and such a bad type of opinion
Yeah.
to put forth to
Well,
the American people,
if-
because it wasn't that, right? We all saw it. Goes right back to where we kept saying, what would you do differently? I wouldn't do anything differently. So that
So
was
you're
the
back
nail in the
to-
coffin.
Were you happier under Biden
Or Trump.
or Trump?
Trump. Yep.
Because Kamala would be 4 more years of Biden.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
also,
It was her election to lose.
Yeah.
And just again, by saying those things, by surrounding herself with with the celebrities that are multi-million-dollar income people, you missed your point
But
with
what-
the average voter, the middle-class person.
What gives me any faith in an actor telling me how to vote
Right.
politically?
Right.
but if you're in their, what do they call that, capsule, you're in their bubble, because if you're working for the mainstream media, when you go out at night, you don't go out and have drinks with Republicans, period. If you look at all of the people involved, all your friends are either in DC or New York, and or Hollywood, they're the glitterati. If you're trendy and chic, you're not hanging around with quote, hillbillies. Okay, well, I mean, that's, and the snobbery and everything that's attached to it. And then when the Hispanic men broke to Trump so hugely, it was like, how dare they? What's wrong with these people? They had banked on this comedian who made these awful jokes.
Right.
Like, oh, this is going to turn people's minds. They're going, what do you think? We're idiots? We can't pay our bills. We can't pay our rent. We can't afford to feed our kids. And you're telling me I should be this. And then Trump was careful. They must, however they had done it, maybe we'll be able to learn this by the next show. He identified white males, young white males, Hispanic males, black males, and other low propensity voters, and tailored his ads and his outreach to them. And when they were talking about college campuses, you saw a significant increase in his vote and a decline in hers on, quote, these college campuses where, and again, the media thought, these young men, is there something? Well, the problem is a lot of young men were turned off by some of the woke policies.
Right. Well, I think one of those big policies was the tuition reimbursement, right, for free. And I know there's stipulations there, and there
you're
are
right.
students that thought they were getting a good deal, and it didn't happen. But blanket policy by just saying that is going to be a reimbursement for students, and it just, you look at the students now, and I had the discussion with my own daughter that she knows what it's cost. She knows the cost for college right now. She knows loans that are going to be taken out. So to her, to say like, well, wait a minute, this, I'm going to have to incur debt for my college. Well, why are all these other individuals getting their debt wiped free?
But
And then
I
there's
don't
she
agree.
can't
I
even
don't
as an
agree with
18-year-old.
what he did, but I
Yeah.
fundamentally don't like the fact that he exacerbated the situation. College tuition, college costs
whatever, yeah.
have been going up twice, 3 times inflation.
Right.
So now you say, as of today, I'm going to wipe out all the debt that people incurred for college.
Yeah.
How does that fix the problem
There's
that
no incentive to lower the rate.
No,
Come
it's-
next
right.
year,
Yep.
the incoming class,
No, I mean, what about the
Right.
millions of people who didn't go to college, who went to plumbing school or electrical school or whatever, and going, who's the chump here?
Exactly.
So, I mean, it was a blatant attempt to buy votes.
Right.
Period.
Yep.
And it didn't seem to even work.
Well, again, it goes right back to who are the people that voted, right? It's that middle class, right?
But even the people
the
who went to
electricians, the
college.
plumbers.
Well, again,
I
and-
feel
yeah.
bad because
Right.
I paid for my daughter's college.
But Al, they don't consider that, they don't, it's like years ago, I had a job where we would place people in jobs. And you really got to thank you for placing people. But the failures, boy, you heard about them.
Yeah.
Because that's the way it is. In this particular case, you do one person benefits, but 7 or 8 go, well, I'm too old, I'm too young, your daughter, I'm too old, I didn't go to college. So you've got four people irritated, and one person may be happy, maybe.
Yep.
You know, so it's
Yeah, but what do you say to the person this year?
that's what I'm saying.
Last year, if you had gone to school a year earlier, your debt would have been wiped out.
Right.
This year, not only aren't we wiping out your debt, but we're giving incentive to the colleges
To raise their rates.
To raise the
Raise
rates.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And it's a good point, like you said. There is no plan or policy or roadmap to how to control the college costs. Right. The cost of that higher education. We don't hear about that at all. We just hear about go take out $100,000 worth of loans and we'll forgive you
But it's
when you get out.
$100,000 a year.
Right.
But
oh,
also-
Some
I
of
know.
these schools are now
Yeah.
90.
Yeah, but also
$90,000,
look at the other thing which shocked people was the total behavior in the elite schools toward Israel and toward the rampant anti-Semitism, which was ironic because the liberal professors and liberal colleges, they were the Jewish population, a bulwark of the old style liberalism. I mean, you know, they're classic people from the New Deal and later on who believe in the government. And here you go at Harvard, you know, with people being threatened, you know, being afraid if they're even found out they're Jewish, they're going to be targeted. And you have, so now you go into the public's going, wait a minute. You're forgiving loans for schools who are teaching this. And then you had the college presidents get up and they said less than nothing. It was almost like a lawyer wrote their statement.
Right. Exactly.
See, and I couldn't understand because you can feel empathy for the Palestinian people. The ones who are living in squalor and peace.
Yeah.
But seeing Americans hold up signs supporting Hamas,
Is
And we know what they did.
animals who cut off the heads of babies, who burnt babies,
oy.
I just sit there and say, I don't care what your politics are. How can you even condone somebody hurting a baby?
And Biden again, this is where the media is so bad. We can't even remember how many American citizens are prisoners right now because the media has flushed it. There's an American Israeli citizen who's in the army. He was killed. His body still hasn't been returned. So when Trump said about a week and a half ago, said, by the way, every prisoner better be returned by January 20th or they'll be held to pay. So one of my very liberal friends goes, well, what's he going to do? I said, you'll find out what he's going to do. It's going to be like Reagan with the Iran hostages.
Right.
It's going to be like as Reagan's taking the oath of office. By the way, the hostages have just been released. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we're seeing a lot of unrest throughout the world.
No, but
right now,
imagine-
right? You know,
yeah.
in the last few months.
Yeah.
Well, starting with
Yeah.
the Palestinians and the Israelis, right?
Now you look at the collapse of Syria.
Over a year.
The collapse of Syria right now, what do you call it, is because Putin's feeling so much pressure in the Ukraine, he didn't have any more resources to ship to this Assad. The Iranians took a real kick in the rear end because they were the big supporters of Assad. I mean, it's pretty clear. We've talked about this on the show before. All these people are proxies for the Iranians.
Iran.
Yeah, the Iranians are moving the chess pieces around, and unfortunately, I think the Ayatollah's probably looking at his bomb shelter right now, going, "Hello."
Yeah, I mean, Trump's going to have his work cut out for him
Yeah.
from the foreign policy side of things.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt about it. But when he starts on January 20th, what's he be given right now? What is he given? He's a lot of turmoil, right, throughout the world that is not going to be his fault, but a lot of people will be finger pointing at him, being like, well, it's all his fault.
Well, maybe.
Well, yeah.
But it's funny. The
Yeah,
French.
but for the last few years,
Yeah. Oh, it's been terrible. Yeah.
we've been saying inflation, the president has nothing to do with it. He can't control it. Okay.
Yeah.
Immigration,
He can't control
he
it.
can't control it. Expense control, he can't control it.
So what does he do?
So you sit there and say, okay, what are the biggest issues facing normal people?
Right.
Okay, and you can say, well, immigration doesn't affect us. Well, it's going to affect us when we start looking at a $300 million high school.
But us means
Yeah,
us, every
exactly.
citizen in the United States.
Right.
Us means every citizen in the United States, not just Milford. It means every
I mean,
citizen. Everybody.
Milford is a microcosm of the rest of the country.
Exactly.
Well, I think, yeah, and going back to it, if we are housing a immigrant population here in Milford, who's paying those bills for the rent, right? So that's got to come from some bucket, you know, and as like you said, we've seen the bucket that's coming to the school to help offset, that
Yeah.
bucket has gotten less. There's less money coming in, and there's more need from our local tax dollars.
And
So
the
that's-
amount is well hidden by the legislature and the governor because they don't dare announce it.
Yep.
In the same way, you can't, no one, you'd have to be living a pipe dream to think there aren't 1,000 of these hotels or more across the country housing the same situation. So that's one issue, but
Well,
it's.
what you said is profound, because the first year when the school committee came to us and said, we're gonna need $6 million increase, incremental.
Right.
We were like, okay, and I need to be young, thin, and have hair.
Okay.
But the state came up with 7 million.
right.
The
But again, where
second
did it
year,
come from?
well, it came right out of your taxes.
All right,
But the
so-
second year,
No free
the
money.
state came up
Yeah.
with another 7 million. So it's like, oh, thank God. The third year,
Yeah.
all that money went to $1 billion to support.
Yeah, but you know what, the
Whatever else,
wallpaper and
yeah.
over crevices, that's the problem, so that's
Oh
what
yeah,
you're doing.
definitely. But that's what we're saying. So the local impact got hit, and I don't think that the average taxpayer understands that
They're
or
not told
sees
this.
that or not
Well, they're
told that, right?
First of all, a lot of it's hidden from
Right.
them by the media, because
Yep.
they don't want to attach,
Right.
quote, blame for something, when
Mm-hmm.
there's no reality and no blame attached to money, but they, because of their sensitivity and their idea of, we can't offend anyone or we can't say anything about anything,
Yeah.
they deny the thing, and this is what they did with the media. The media denied the border crisis. There's a
But Ed,
video.
they can't deny when you get that envelope from town hall. I mean, the average house in Milford now is what,
Yeah,
7,000,
Al,
7,500?
Al,
It's
gonna,
tax, yeah.
Al, you might know this, but you're in a very privileged position because of your being on the finance committee. But when the media don't make the connection, if you went to school and said this in school in front of a teacher in Milford, you'd be called names. If you came in and said, the reason my mother and father's tax bill went up is because of immigrants, you would be taken to the office. That discussion isn't allowed to be had. So come on, let's get real here.
But when I get my tax bill
Yeah,
and it goes up $350, $500 a quarter,
yeah.
I can't deny it.
But
Right.
you,
And it's all
but
about,
Al,
Yeah.
no, wait a minute. You're not getting the thing is, you're not given the reason for this because it's spread out as like, it's not there. Let's just put it that way. There's no media that's telling you your tax bill went up because of what? They may just say the town did it, it's the police
Right.
department, it's
And-
the fire department, there's
just
no
the cost of doing
connection.
business,
You
right?
you
Yeah.
happen to have this particular knowledge, and Chris does, because you're on the school committee and you're on the finance committee. I wouldn't know that if I was sitting out there on another town board. I go,
but wouldn't
hey,
you ask?
why would you ask?
Because
who are you
I'm-
gonna, by the way,
$2,000 is
Al,
a
we're
lot of
having
money.
We're having a fruitless discussion. Who are you going to ask? You're going to go to a selectmen's meeting? Of course not. There's no one to ask. There's no media to talk about this, unfortunately. That's why, let's just not,
Well, I think too, when you look at how
Yeah.
liberal Massachusetts
Yeah.
is, who do you go ask? Do you go to the State House? Right? They're the ones that are setting the budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
I'm not
we
saying,
know-
I mean, I'm on record saying, if the kids come to Milford,
Yeah, but-
Yep.
we educate them.
but that
Correct.
isn't the thing.
Yeah.
The
But
thing
we-
is,
yeah.
this story is being written, the election didn't rise or fall because of Milford, Massachusetts. In fact, Trump's total in Milford only probably went up 5% from before, but it wasn't enough. But this story is being written all over the country, particularly in the areas closer to the border. Because, I mean, there's Arkansas, Louisiana, they're all on the way from the border, all the way up. They're saying there's towns in Colorado in the mountains which are impacted by immigrants. For God's sakes, you come from Central America, warm and nice, and now you're in the Rocky Mountains in the
Yeah.
winter. I mean,
Yeah.
it shows you the range of what's going on. And
Yeah.
then, of course, some coming across the northern border from Canada. Yeah, it's crazy.
There's an impact. We don't know what that impact
No,
is,
and it's-
but we know it's significant.
And I think that
Yeah.
was the thing that moved the election in certain ways. And particularly, as I say, with the Senate, if we can segue to that, Trump is obviously going to be picking his cabinets. We've already heard some choices which are very amazing, like Kennedy for Health and Human Services. Who's he got to you? He has Attorney General, a woman from Florida who's very good. What else have you have?
Well, there's been a lot of controversy. I mean,
Of
Bodie,
course. Yeah.
well qualified, but you start looking at some of the choices,
Like who?
like defense,
Yep,
and you sit there and say,
Pete
okay,
Hegseth, yeah.
is he qualified?
Well, question is, I think what Trump's agenda is the same with, I think the more profound one is Health and Human Services with Kennedy, because there's a lot of people today who are very concerned, and they've been labeled all sorts of bad names by people, but are very concerned about the effects of vaccinations and vaccines, multiple vaccines and vaccinations on children and on people. And you have the medical healthcare industry, which is, that's what it is. You had Fauci, who's a symbol of that, and a lot of people want a thorough investigation of what's going on. We just had this incident where this guy, apparently very smart student from Maryland, assassinated the CEO of United Healthcare. Well, United Healthcare, for a little factoid, has a 33% rejection rate of claims, whereas the average in the healthcare industry is 19. United Healthcare does not have a very good reputation, and this guy was being investigated for insider trading and stock dumping, and his board was as well. Now, the guy who did this left a manifesto, and no one's justifying anyone killing anyone. However, he did say we spend the most on healthcare in the world, and we have
The sickest population.
42nd in the world
Yeah.
as far as, so
Yeah.
so that doesn't
Yeah.
justify
and
a
I,
thing.
And I like the fact that Kennedy, he's going to focus too on food and what
Yeah.
and hormones and additives and all these things. Like, so I know he's kind of a little bit of a lightning rod because of that. But why not ask the question, right? Why not? Again, goes back to mainstream media is not talking about it. So if you
They
get
can't,
someone
yeah.
like him that is pointing out
Yeah.
all of these different aspects that he may deem that they're unhealthy, so let's have a conversation. But we can't talk about it until
No.
someone like him points it out.
No,
So
but-
I'm all for
But
it.
being
right?
totally against vaccinations.
He isn't, though.
Yeah.
That is the thing.
But that's the impression.
Well, again, Al, we
Yeah.
just talked about the media.
Yeah.
We know what they're dealing
Yeah,
with.
and I'm not going to agree with everything
No, of course
like
not. We're
that
not. We're not
he
at all.
says, right?
But can't
so
you at least investigate this? The
Well, I
last
have
time
no
I
problem
knew,
with
last time I
answering the
knew
question.
science shouldn't be
Yeah.
afraid of
right.
investigation.
Yeah, let's have the conversation.
Because, right?
Let's
Measles, mumps,
look at-
rubella.
Okay.
Yeah, we know that those are required vaccinations that
But
have
again,
kept
but-
things
but
at
we
bay.
don't know.
you know.
We have never figured out. I bring this up years ago. My mother had a cancer doctor, and she is my age. And at the time, she was, obviously younger. So let's see, 30 years ago. And she said, Ed, she goes, when you and I are your mother's age, the number of people with cancer would twitch up by one. I think it was one in 7. It'll be now 1 in 6. I said, why? She goes, because our generation was subjected to food additives. And we don't know, because empirical science doesn't gauge the interaction of, just say, for example, someone has a soda, a hot dog, a cigarette. All right, obviously 3 bad things, but say a soda, a hamburger, and something else. The interaction of the chemicals in there have never been shown. There's never been any possible testing. But one of the sacrifices we've made for cheaper food is preservatives.
Preservatives, yeah.
So preservatives.
Yeah, preservatives, the hormones to get it to grow quicker, that
Exactly.
that feeds the
And-
animals that
and she
we
said
eat.
so.
Yeah,
Now she
so,
goes,
yeah.
is that ever going to be investigated given the power of the healthcare industry? She said, I don't. She said, by the way, I'm not a radical or a conservative or anything. She said, I'm just apolitical. But she goes, just think of the power of these groups, the power of hospitals. Look at in Massachusetts, the power. Al, what was the figure? We had it a couple of years ago when Bob Burns was still with us. I think it's like 1 in every 6 or 7 people in Massachusetts works in some healthcare aligned
Life science.
science thing between hospitals, researchers, universities. And it's amazing to think.
Truly.
Yeah. So it is a very powerful force
Yep.
to go on the way. And then again, Trump's choices, I think, are designed to upset the apple cart.
Yes.
Go into and go in and shake things up, because I think first of all, he was a victim, number one. As you remember, Biden just pardoned his son Hunter for allegedly a crime that didn't exist when it all started. So Hunter's laptop is brought into the shop, and they denied it was the laptop. Google, Facebook, and whatever suppressed the news of the laptop. The reporter from the New York Post was the only reporter who reported it, and she was sort of blackballed. 51 around there, health intelligence experts said that that was all Russian misinformation. 51 of the most Republican and Democrat, and now we find out all that was baloney. The laptop did exist. In fact, it existed so much that now he's being pardoned for it. So he's being pardoned for when he was on the board.
What's your reaction to the
Yeah.
pardon?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, he pardoned his son. I don't fault him for that, right? I think that I would.
Yes.
If I was in that position, I would
See,
pardon
I
my
would have
own
been
child.
okay, better,
know?
if he had
But-
said, "He's my son."
Correct.
End of story.
Yeah.
He's my son.
Right. For months and months, all we heard
But to
was,
hear, "I'm not
no
going
one's
to, I'm
above the
not
law.
going to."
No
But
one's
that was
above
for
the law. I'm
political
not
reasons,
going
because
to.
he knew if he ever
Yeah.
said at the time he was going to do it,
Yeah.
he would have even lost more because he was battling for his.
Yeah, I don't even think he would have. I think
Oh,
if he
yes.
would have, I think though, if he would have said, what would you do if it was
was in
your
a tough
own
spot.
son?
That's
I
it.
feel like he should have just taken that high road from that standpoint, as opposed to continually to say nobody is above the law.
that's what-
and all these lawmakers
Oh.
saying that same thing.
Oh.
Nobody's above the law. Nobody's
Unless
above
you're
the
a
law.
yeah.
But then all of a sudden, guess
Yeah,
what?
but
He
ironically-
pardoned. So
ironically-
now, where's the soundbite now? Well, other than, oh boy.
And by the
what
way,
did they
and
do?
here's the other one. So when Trump's thing came about the hush money, 30 plus misdemeanors were magically transformed into a felony,
Felony, yes.
which is I've never heard. I asked a lot of different lawyers.
Yeah.
That took something, but it took a New York DA to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Senator Fetterman was on recently, and he's come across as he seems to be a lot better health than he was, the senator from Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And he came on, and he was came on the View, and they weren't happy. He goes, well, I'm just going to put it this way. He goes, I'd say the Hunter Biden trial was political, and I'd say Donald Trump's trial in New York was political. Well, they didn't know what to say, because now it's like, yeah, but Donald Trump did this, this, and this. He goes, listen, they're both political. They would have never happened in any kind of other world,
Right.
but that's the way things are today.
Right.
And he goes, unfortunately, that's the way they are. So when they threw everything but the kitchen sink at Trump, I mean, everything, what else could they throw at him? And people just said, hey, we don't care, and we probably half of us don't believe what happened.
Right. Unfortunately, there are a lot of situations like that where people get into a situation where someone is paid off. There's like let's not pretend that was the situation that Trump was in. Now, the manner of which it was paid, the Stormy was paid off, was wasn't done appropriately.
let's put it that way. It's
Right,
appropriate,
it wasn't
yes.
done appropriately. But let's make sure that
Everyone knows.
that's not the same. That's not a very unique situation that
Yes.
happens throughout the United States, right?
One- yeah, one
and
Congress-
they
yeah.
they looked for ways of how to exploit that payment against Trump.
One
Again,
con-
and it
one
was
Congress-
it wrong? Probably
One
it was.
congressman got up, he was a Democrat, believe it or not, and he said, I'm going to ask the House and Senate leadership, how much money do we allocate every year for a fund to pay off,
To defend,
not defend, pay off people who file complaints
Right.
against this House,
Right.
the senators and representatives. So if someone claims the senator put his hand in an appropriate place, here's $50,000. Comes right out of a slush fund.
Right.
So basically that's yep.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
our money,
It
of course,
happens,
obviously.
do you
Yeah,
think the
yeah.
pardons
So-
are over?
No.
No, I don't think there will. I don't. Off the top of my head, I don't know of any that will be as high profile
Yeah.
as the Hunter
Unless
Biden
he
one.
pardons Fauci or something
Yeah.
like that.
Right.
But
So-
I think he's obviously irrelevant. He was in a tour of Africa in some poor country in Africa that was, I guess he had trouble staying awake. But
Yes.
but Macron, being French and being an opportunist, personally invited Trump to the reopening of Notre Dame Cathedral.
Yep.
And so he sat one person away from Joe Biden. So the French did it perfectly. They had Trump, the president of France's wife, Joe Biden, and his daughter. So they were till the president of France's wife sat down, Jill and he were having a conversation. But I happened to turn it on because I wanted to see the rededication, and amazing work. For a minute, I guess it cost 900 million, and they used 2,000 artisans, and in some cases they had to revive medieval techniques. They had to get the wood from areas which they'd never done before because the oak was,
It had to be very specific.
yeah, and the bells and the organ
But
and
the
everything.
vibrance, the way that Notre Dame looks now,
It's
it's
also
amazing.
It's also
Yes.
like it's
Yep.
almost got a toothbrush because the stone is clean. Over the years, that's been through wars. From 1100 basically. So it's been through wars, revolutions,
Yes.
almost being this and that and the other thing. And now the stone is clear and beautiful and amazing.
The Republicans now have all three chairs.
Yes.
What effect do you think
challenge.
that'll have?
Well, it's a challenge when you have total power like that. I think, particularly in the House, I think the Freedom Caucus will not be as rebellious as they were. They will listen to Trump when he tells them not to be crazy about bills. I think Trump is going to work with the leadership and in the Senate to craft his stuff and get things through. Because I think he knows he's on a time clock. He's got the midterm elections going to be coming up in just 2 years. But if alone he can help control the border and deport the criminal elements,
Right.
Which is very important. And of course now we're hearing, well, where are they going to go? Can we afford to do it? Can we do this? Can we do that? Every roadblock in the world to be in action.
Where are they going to go?
Well, hopefully back.
Let's see, I invite you into my home for dinner. You start breaking my furniture.
Yeah.
I just want you out of my house.
Yes, yep.
Where you go afterwards, I really don't care.
But
Well, you
there's
have
the,
to
there's the
drop
door.
them somewhere.
Right. There's the door.
And if they really are bad criminal elements, then you have to incarcerate them.
Well, look what happened yesterday with the Dominican Republic. They had hit the
Oh, I don't-
point where the Haitians were becoming too much of a burden on their economy.
Oh, no.
They drove them to the border in cages.
Oh, my God.
Hadn't
I
heard
mean,
that.
you talk about sad. You sit there and say, they had people, human beings in cages, driven to the border and said, "You're back in Haiti."
Right. Just
And
go.
obviously there's guns pointed at them, so they don't make sure
Well,
they're going
I don't think it
Yeah, yeah, you don't
was
have a choice.
voluntary.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same way. I'm doing a guesstimate. The border from United States to Guatemala, which is below Mexico, has got to be 1,500 miles, maybe 2,000 miles, the length of Mexico. And so you make your way all the way across Mexico with the help of cartels or whatever.
Right.
You're not allowed to even think of staying in Mexico. I mean, isn't it curious? Because people are told when they cross the border in Mexico, there's a very secure border at Guatemala and Mexico. But if you cross, you must
Yeah. Keep on
Continue.
going.
keep going
Keep on
all
going.
the way to
yeah.
the jackpot.
Yep. And as you said, the cartels control that, and they're
Yeah,
making their
yeah.
money.
But
There's no
if you
doubt,
put
but
back into place, stay in Mexico,
Yep.
don't you
Which-
think the Mexican
Which
government?
Mexico, would under Trump it worked.
I was going to say, if you couldn't just say free pass, keep going.
Do you remember? Do you remember when Biden came in, and now we know what we know about him, and the day he took office, he had a stack of executive orders
Executive
like
orders,
this.
yeah.
Obviously, he had read one of them if he read one, but they were a reversal of every Trump policy,
right.
including the border. And when Trump there's a video you can look out, the 5 most effective Trump ads. They have them, they play them very strategic, like at football games, at whatever. And one dealt with the transgender issue, one dealt with the border, where she said, "Well, I haven't been to Europe." I mean, the interview she
Right.
did where she didn't
Why
really know
haven't you
where
been
she'd
to the
been.
border?
Yeah, and and whatever, and it was like, does she even know what the border? And then there was another ad. There was another one, and then the other one was what she would do differently. And you can imagine the people on the View must have been screaming fits. The Republicans are using a clip from the View, to
yeah.
sink her.
we thank
Why
them.
haven't we heard anything about the wall?
What will?
The one that Trump started building,
Well,
that,
we may hear about it soon again.
Yeah.
because if I remember right, they sold off for pennies on the dollar all the materials.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
so that you couldn't continue building the
Yeah.
wall.
Well, the irony in the election, though, is California, because they have that crazy vote by mail, 3 Republican congressmen were miraculously defeated by the time the votes were counted, by 100 votes each. So California has moved even further to the left.
Yeah.
Which
Hard
is
to believe.
which you which you would think, given San Francisco and Oakland and all the cities that are rebelling
They
against
keep moving left until they hit into the ocean, right?
Exactly.
All
And
on
then, of
its own.
course, now we're going to have to ask, the new border guy is basically said he's going to come up and visit Wu and talk to her or put her in
Yeah.
jail. We're going to have to see what the defund the police does. That was another great idea.
Well, wait a minute. Our governor has said she's not going to cooperate with the feds.
Yes.
What does that mean?
We have to ask her. Can you get her on the show?
Yeah, I
I
feel
mean,
like
if there's a
because
federal law,
yeah.
No.
you
I
know,
feel like
she's gonna
since
make it difficult.
she's in charge of the state police, right?
Yeah.
So she's just not going to allow the state police to detain people for a certain amount of time and put out those
How about
ICE
criminals?
detainers
That's where,
and
where
things
the,
that,
if
or
the guy came
or
up and said,
hold
by
for
the way,
those, right?
I'm only
So,
deporting criminals.
Yeah.
What is she going to say? Well, she invite the criminals into her house and live? I mean, what is the...
Yeah.
And then, by the way, remember when all these cities were sanctuary cities till actually immigrants started to move there? Like New York was a sanctuary city till
Yeah.
the buses
Till the
started
buses
to
showed
arrive,
up,
and then they weren't.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she can do whatever she wants with the state police wise.
Yeah.
But again, the federal government, if they come in and they want to deport the criminal elements, which I'm all for, right? Then they have the ability to do that.
the president
Now,
can-
I get the fact that people are very concerned of what happens after the criminal element, and they're saying, are they going
Okay,
to go after
but-
the
but you
families?
have to make...
But let's at least concentrate on the criminal element and allow for that to happen.
Yeah, why would people want to lump, in ultimate disrespect to immigrants, criminals from regular hardworking people?
Right.
Well,
That's what I'm
again,
saying. That's frightening.
they
Yeah,
bring up
yeah.
the percentage that there's 100,000 rapists, murderers.
Oh, my God.
Well, yeah, that's 1%. If you look at American citizens, there's probably 1% of bad people too.
Right.
But again, no one's saying anyone's different. We're just saying that the methods that were used to come in here enrich the cartels.
Yeah.
It's ironic. The president of Mexico is a woman, and she did some statement about Trump, and a Trump official said, "We've got all the records. You're in the pay of the cartels. They elected you president." No,
Nothing to see here. Yeah.
no. So it's amazing to go. So it's bad enough that whatever. So
It'll be interesting we get together again in a couple months.
yeah. How much
To
time
see-
we have?
yeah.
You have
To see what
Yep.
changes have been made, because it'll be
It'll
right
be a slow
after.
process.
Yeah.
And anyone who thinks you're going to undo 4 years of Bidenism in a month or 2 months or 3
Yeah, that's
months
not
is
realistic.
dream. But you can take dramatic steps, and I think that's what's going to occur over especially in Europe and whatever.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, as always, to our 6 loyal viewers, thanks for joining. It'll be an interesting ride we're starting on, and we look forward to continuing this conversation. So as always, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight.
Yes.
Good night, all.
Thank you for tuning
night.
in.